Hi, I'm Pete Morton.
Hey, I'm Shad Flores.
We are your hosts on the Iron Edge podcast. This is our first podcast. We're super excited about it. And we know that a lot of you are already signing up on the website and have been involved on the Facebook page and everything else. And we haven't really advertised this too much. And really, the group is just growing like crazy. And we're super excited about that. But we wanted to bring on as our first guest somebody that I know personally, I've served with, and is a man of God, a leader, military leader. He's a lieutenant colonel in the Army now, but he's also served in the Navy. There's some crazy things in the Navy with dolphins and seeking out mines and EOD and just some interesting stuff, as well as, in the Army. He's a Apache pilot and Blackhawk pilot, commander, a leader for many years. And so we're going to be talking with Lieutenant Colonel Judd Douglas. He's also a Christian man, Christian leader within his own house, within his churches. He's volunteered his time to work with different people, to be involved in different projects. His wife's a realtor, but she's also very involved in the church. But he's also seen a lot of what we're discussing here, what we're talking about here, just the disillusionment of men and maybe the lack of opportunities through the church. And so I think it's going to be really great to have him on. And I think we're going to learn a lot from him. He's also a member of Iron Edge, Phoenix, the Phoenix chapter. So anybody in Phoenix can actually in the future get together and talk with him as well. But we're looking forward to having him on. So without further ado, thanks for coming on, Judd. It's kind of cool looking at the pool of individuals within Iron Edge already. We have quite a few people that are just highly qualified leaders and Christian leaders on top of that. And I think it's great that we can actually pull internally and find that kind of quality within this organization, within Iron Edge. This is our first podcast. So it should be interesting. We'll see how long it goes before the devil kills the internet again, which he already did once. But we're just happy to have you on, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this. What I like to do, though, is really, I know a little bit about you. We worked together in the Arizona Army National Guard. Judd actually worked. He flew Apaches and Blackhawks. I did the weather. I was just the intel guy in the aviation unit, which really means all you have to do is pull out AccuWeather and go, okay, sir, today the weather's going to be.
Well, hey, this is the time I get to jump in. For all the guys that weren't military, welcome you to the podcast. Welcome to Iron Edge. We get to glean from these guys, and I know there's a lot of respect and admiration, but we're brothers for lots of reasons, but we're certainly honored and privileged to have a leader in the faith, but also a leader that serves our nation to come and just bring some insight. So, there's something for all of us to glean for sure.
Shad's our acronym checker. So when we start talking, we start speaking in tongues, he's going to check us and make sure that we define what we're speaking about as well.
Yeah, but, I know that the Jackson 5 sang about ABCs and 1, 2, 3, so I'm good there.
Totally. Well, hey man, but before we get started, I gotta say, props to you two, man. Props to your heart, Pete. You know what? People inspire me by the simple fact of action, right? So often, guys, like you'll hear people talk about these great ideas and what needs to happen in the country or in the unit or whatever, right? But it's always those dudes, like it's your go-to guy, right? It's always those dudes that actually go from the actual thought, from the concept to putting it into action. You know what I mean? Which is a huge piece of, I think, what we're really lacking right now. But you did it, brother. You know what I mean? When you call me, you say, hey, we're going to do this. And then next thing I know, you're calling me and podcasts getting set up. And there's this beautiful website. I mean, props, dude. I love your heart. I love your passion. I love the fact that you went out and did it, brother. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this thing goes. And the simple fact that you're listening to the Spirit, that the Spirit lead you, that's spot on, brother.
Well, I've always been the kind of guy I don't have much choice usually. It's like, oh yeah, it was like Paul in the Bible, right? Paul. I relate to that dude, right? This guy, he's pretty much a Nazi, right? Going around and killing Jews and everything else. Nobody thinks of that Paul. He's riding in and he gets knocked on his butt by Jesus off his horse.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, hey, you're going to follow me and you're going to do this or you're going to be blind. He's like the only guy in the Bible that really didn't have much of a choice, you know? I find myself in those situations quite a bit. But with this is a no-brainer. I think there's so many men out there craving direction, just the ability to serve. They want to serve. Their heart's desire is to serve. And they're finding that a lot of doors just kind of getting closed on them because they don't fit in or the branding's not right, whatever the reason. And so I think that this is the catalyst for that. I don't think it's going to be me. This is going to be all God pushing this. He's opened so many doors already for us. Ask Shad. It was just like we were talking about it. I was like, well, I need to think about it. And I just called him up and said, I'm going to do it. So there's the website. Awesome. And he was like, okay, let's do this. And we just did it, you know? Yeah. And like I said, everything's kind of just flowed. And so we know that God's leading us, God's directing us. But now it's a matter of all of us together making those decisions to start reaching out.
Yeah. I tell you what, man. I was just going to say, like, when you're talking about closed doors, you know, knock and the door will open, right? Like, because I'm similar to your nature, right? Once I get a thought in my head, I go after it. Right. And what I've learned is that I do have to actually have a little tactical patience every now and then. But I'm still just horrible at it. I take off full speed. I get excited, I get motivated, and I take off running. So a lot of times my prayer is not I don't knock to open doors. I pray that the doors will be closed. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, you know, to go to your point, those guys out there that feel like doors are being closed, probably being closed for a reason. You know what I mean? Being closed for a reason. And all the way down to one point, we were actually looking for a house and there's a whole lot of confusion. And I asked the doors, I'm like, hey, look, I'm excited about this house, but if this isn't the right house, close the door. We literally went to the house to look at it. We could not get inside. Doors were locked. We couldn't get the key or anything. Literally, I'm like,
that's so awesome.
And the lady was like, well, we can. Yeah, dude. The lady was like, hey, we can go back and we get. I'm like, nope, door's locked. We're moving on.
Dude, that's how it should be. Hey, God, should I take this job? You walk to the door and it just slams in your face. All right, I'm good.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It would. I know about you. We've talked about your bio already. We've kind of given everybody a little background on you, but what I don't know is your testimony and how you came to know the Lord. It'd be interesting to find out about that journey a little bit, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, so it's a journey. It's a continued journey. It's still on the journey, still trying to figure it out. Figured out some, haven't figured out all, right? So I grew up what I would say would be in the wilderness. My family we weren't church-going family, right? My mother divorced my father when I was young, when I was 5, married another man that he became my father, you know, took care of me. And a lot of that breaking off was because of some church issues, you know? And so inside my family, the dynamic was like, we weren't attending church, you know? And, you know, so we would say a prayer, you know, over a Thanksgiving meal and whatnot, but it really wasn't there. Right. And, getting into my high school years, I had a couple of coaches, especially like at a state track meet that started saying a prayer over me, and I could feel an unctioning. There was something deep and there was something bigger that I know that I needed to just keep searching. Right. And so, when you're talking about my testimony and especially when we get into like the leadership and the Christian values and all that, it really does blend together, because my coming of being a man, so to speak, and being a Christian man, all kind of manifested kind of at the same time. When I started coming into the military, is the same time I started searching for Christ, you know. Rocky, bumpy at the beginning, not understanding it, feeling very insecure, right? Because you'd go in and you'd kind of just start trying to figure some things out, and they would start talking about, you know, very simple, I hate using the term characters of the Bible, because they're not characters, they're men and women that lived, but they would talk about these stories of these characters of the Bible, and I'm not knowing them. And they're, you know, you should have learned this when you were a kid, right? And so transition through the Navy, 4 years, come out pursuing a degree and sitting in college. And I took a religion 101 class, because one of the things I didn't understand was, you know, one book, one Bible, a bazillion different sects of it, right? Like what is, and I didn't get it. So I did a study for a semester of it. And in Page, my little town, there's this road that we call Church Row, because when you drive down that road, there's a church. That's all it's there is a church and a church and a church and a church, right? And so what I did was I went, and each Sunday I went and sat in that church to understand it. You know, and I went and sat in the Catholic church. I went and sat in the LDS church. I went and sat in the Methodist church, the Baptist church. I went through all of them, you know, to try to figure out what's it about and where does Judd fit into this whole thing, you know. When it kind of played out, you know, I found this little, if you want to call it a hole in the wall church. They were actually renting a building. It was a non-denominational, but there was just something, to me, there was just something powerful in it. There's something authentic. It probably helped that the pastor, who's still a great friend of mine, Manny Parks, and I still consider him kind of my pastor. He was also a military guy, right? He came from the military. So there's just this link, that there was this thing there, you know? And so that's kind of how I came into the church. Fast forward a little bit, just a year or two after that, you know, at this time now, my mom has joined another church, and there was a little bit of a push because my brother was getting baptized, right? And I didn't understand the whole baptism thing, but the church that he was being baptized in, I didn't feel a comfort in there, you know? And, but I mean, you now have your mother, right? Who's such a strong and powerful force in your life, right? Saying, hey, you should do this with your brother. And then you have just the thought of, you know, baptism and what it is. And you know, this is something that you should do, right? But something still didn't feel right with the whole thing to me. There was a religious tone to it, I guess, is really what I should get after. And so, you know, the night before, man, I'm praying fervently, and I just very frustrated, and I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? And so anyway, I was at 3:16 in the morning, and I see you smiling, Chad, because you know where I'm going. At 3:16 in the morning, like my room was just bright as all can get out, right? And so I open my eyes, like, what is going on? And the only thing that really I can see is my alarm clock that says 3:16. Now, if you've watched any football game, you know John 3. Everybody knows John 3:16, right? God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Everybody believes him, right? So everybody knows that. But my mind, when I'm looking at it, was blank. I had to physically get out of bed and go get my Bible and open it up and read it. I had to read it, you know, at John 3:16. And so I started right there, man. And I could just feel the peace, the power, the strength, the love, basically like fall upon me. And from that point, it transitioned from what I thought church was, right? This religious entity, you know, from birth and going every once in a while in high school. I did go with friends to a church, but I was obviously an outsider, you know, but it transitioned from that time, from this religious sect thing to, he said, the relationship is with me, brother. You know what I mean? Follow me. It's you and me. You don't have to go through anything. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be with me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so from that point, man, so that point, that was like my pivoting point of the whole thing, that it's not about a religion. It's about a straight up relationship. And once you figure that piece out, man, it transforms you deep inside.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think about mine, very similar story, but I grew up in a very strict faith, with a lot of good foundational principles. The one thing I got out of the church I grew up in, Chad and I both went to the same church growing up, was a foundation in the word and understand the word. But I've actually never had a moment where all of a sudden I was saved or whatever. For me, it's always been keep going, keep going, keep going. It's like, just like anything in the military, it's always been, you have to keep working at this to get better at it. Not that I'm working to find Christ, but it was always like, you're going to have to, in order to maintain that relationship with me, you're going to have to work for it, because the devil's constantly trying to grab me and take me out of that. So I wasn't as fortunate to have that kind of conversion thing, but it's always been there since I was a young boy. I've known God's presence. I've never denied it, even when I was out doing stupid crap. I didn't really dive into God and who he was until I was in the military. And of course, when the threat of death is there, I joined in 02 or 01 and went straight to Afghanistan in 02. When the threat of death is there, it really makes you start thinking a little bit about God, right? Everybody was.
Oh,
that
yeah.
Poor chaplain, he was constantly getting harassed. But, hey, what about this? What about this? But yeah, no,
well, hey, Paul said it, right? I haven't already attained, but I'm going to press on toward a mark.
Yep.
There's a prize, there's a high calling. And then, the Bible also says, a line upon line, here a little, there a little. Like, you can't get this all in one fell swoop, even in one moment. That's just the beginning, right? And so a lot of times it's just the grind, just grinding it out, but staying after it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think a lot of people think they're going to have some kind of huge conversion spot, but it doesn't always happen. But and that's an amazing. That's amazing. So you were in the Navy, you went through the Navy, got out of the Navy, and then transitioned. When did the conversion part of stuff happen for you? What was the time period on that?
So that happened just prior to flight school. So it was I was out of the Navy, pursuing the degree was mostly complete. Went into the Arizona Army National Guard, because they were the ones that would basically they would get me into the fight the quickest, right? It was yeah, exactly. No, so I had a contract with the Navy. It was an 8-year contract, and but literally what it came down to was the Army Guard could get me in quicker, And granted, so I went in 96 in the Navy, and then I'm out when 9/11 happens. Right. And so then you could just imagine, as you went in 02, there was this huge, you're like, dude, I'm not done. You know what I mean? And so anyway, it was during that time when I got picked up. I was just finishing up OCS and getting ready to head off to Fort Rucker, Alabama. Flight school is when that transition happened. And then beautifully, when we go to, Alabama, right, the Bible Belt, when we hit down in Alabama, driving out from post, we see this little, just what you'd think, man, this little white church with the steeple, and I'm like, that's where we're going. And it was the Southern Baptist church, and they were great, man. They fed into us so deeply, you know what I mean? They brought us in and fed us and just started getting us to serve and help with the kids and everything else. And so actually from that, in the middle of that, all the way in Fort Rucker, Alabama, I actually flew back home to Page, Arizona. So I could finally get baptized. But I wanted to do it not in a church. I wanted to do it in my Lake Powell, where I felt like I was with nature and with God. And so I flew back and had, my pastor take me out to the lake and like, hey man, we're gonna do this. I'm ready for this.
That's awesome. Did he hold you under for a while?
A little bit, yeah.
You're a diver though, right? So
and that's exactly what he said. He's like, just gonna have to take a little longer.
Nice.
I said, yeah, there's a lot of dirt there, man. You got to wash off. So
I mean, you have this conversion. You're in the military. A lot of times, I think when I was in, at least, the principles that I was taught as a leader, right? I was started out enlisted and then became an officer, but the principle I was taught as a leader throughout really actually helped me with my walk. I I had accountability. I had people, keeping me on the path, and there was the threat, of course, if you do something stupid like drink and drive or whatever, cheat on your spouse, you can get arrested and charged for that in the military, which I think is great. But
absolutely,
those principles really helped me. But I'm curious about how during that time, your conversion, you're going into is you're becoming an officer in the Army. You're a pilot, of course, and that is a whole separate set of leadership skills that you have to be a pilot. What helped you? What principles really stood out and helped you with your walk? How were you able to kind of integrate the two to continue on and really trying to find and fulfill your purpose, your mission?
Yeah. So, good question, man. Like how do those blend together? And like I said, from the get-go, I was birthed into both at the same time. I was birthed into these military concepts at the same time that I started learning about Christ and the way that he expects us to basically serve each other, right? And so most of that like intertwines with itself throughout my life, and it's been a continuous process. At one point, I kind of had the same question that you just asked, basically just internally to myself. And when we come into command, right, you make your command philosophy, right? And it's basically this memorandum that you post to your company or to your battalion that basically says, hey man, this is how I do things. This is how I expect things to happen, right? And so that command philosophy, what I did was I actually just created those tenets that you're talking about, and biblically based mostly, because that's where my strength and foundation and leadership really kind of stem from, right? And so I created the acronym SERVICE, and that is my command philosophy, is service. And so it's selfless service, empathy, resiliency, vision, integrity, communication, and enthusiasm. And so much of that is kind of like rooted into the biblical principles. Obviously there's a reason why it's called service. And then the first bullet of the acronym is selfless service. If you read the Gospels, just the Gospels alone, and you don't figure out that you're supposed to be serving others, then you need to start over, pray about it, and go again, because you missed the entire point, man. And so the selfless service kind of, it's rooted in biblical principles. If you're any type of Christian, you've read the Gospels, you understand that it's selfless service. And the first time I really saw it on display, much like you, Pete, was when I was enlisted, and we were in Newfoundland doing an op up there. And, we had the dolphins up there, and we had the whole thing, doing a mission, looking for these bombs. Yeah, the mines underwater and everything. Such a great time, right? But as we're rolling out of here, and we're getting the animals on the C5 and everything, we have to run back to the firehouse, which is what we were staying in, is what they gave us, the Canadians gave us to use. And, to make sure it's good so we can turn it back over. And so I'm in there with my senior chief, who was just a great leader, a stud of a guy, very well decorated in a time that it was hard to be decorated, right? In the 90s, 80s and 90s. And, we walk into the restroom, the head, right? And he's like, oh, we need to clean the toilets. Well, if you're a petty officer, third class, and the senior chief, EOD tech tells you, hey, we need to clean the toilets, that's basically, hey, brother, you need to pick up a brush and start cleaning the toilets, and that's a hit to an ego when we're this elite, EOD mobile unit, special clearance team 1 that's flying around the world doing these things. And then now I got to pick up a thing and clean the toilet, right? So it's a little bit of humility in there. But so I go in and I'm going to clean the toilets. And so I start cleaning the toilets. Well, here's this senior chief, 28 years of service, highly decorated, comes in right next to me, grabs a brush and starts cleaning the toilet next to me. I tell you that no matter what this guy told me after that, I'd do it, because there's no way that he wouldn't step next to me and do it. And so there's so much like strength and unity when you just show that you are the selfless servant, that you're there with them. You know what I mean? And Jesus did the same thing, right? Like he started washing the feet. Like, I don't think people understand the dynamic of that, but feet were pretty nasty. It was very symbolic back then,
He watched his feet. Yeah. And knowing that he's going to betray him and send him to the cross, he still watched that dude's feet. That must have really, can you imagine that? You have a traitor in your platoon, you know that a guy's going to turn you over to the Taliban or something, right?
Yeah.
And you still go in and clean his bunk for him, or make his bunk for him or something like that. That's just it's hard to imagine.
I have to jump in here because you talk about the toilets, and so in the church we hear that, right? Leaders are gonna clean the toilet, right? If you're a true leader, then you're first one to clean the toilet. But I think something that we have to remember that you pointed out is that the highest leader on your team also got down next to you. So we can't forget that we clean the toilets and then we don't get to another level and stop cleaning the toilets. We serve right alongside and we show people this is how you do it. We get our hands dirty, hopefully not too dirty when you're cleaning toilets, but
yeah, somebody, I don't remember who said it, and I don't remember where I grabbed it from, but somebody basically phrased it as, if any job is too low for you, then leadership is too high for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. If you can't lead by example, you shouldn't do it.
Really good.
Absolutely, man.
Yep, I agree. And I think there's a lot of, right now we're having this discussion because there is this huge vacuum within the church, and within I don't know how to put it, the church and the church buildings where all the church resides.
The church at large.
Yeah. There's a huge vacuum when it comes to that type of leadership. But you have all these people who want to serve, and for some reason just can't get past. There's the gatekeeper section. Something's going on. I don't know what level of leadership it's at, but I do think that the leadership, of course, it trickles down. Your philosophy that you put out while you're in command, you push that down to your subordinate leaders, and they're pushing that down to their subordinate leaders, and then to the team. I think there's something missing with that within the church. Either people are too scared to lead like that, or to push that philosophy down to their subordinate leaders and out to the rest of the church. Because really, if you think about the church congregation, that's like your privates, right? Volunteers, they're not getting paid, or if they are, it's very little. But it's not getting pushed out to those people to where they can start looking at leading and serving and things like that. So I do see there's a vacuum, and that's why we're having this conversation in the first place, of opportunity for people to do that, and where leadership is not pushing that down to their subordinates within the church. I don't know if you've seen that or not. I know you're involved with the church and service in the church, but what do you see as you're a leader of men with the push of, if I don't do this right, guys die. And then you also see, of course, leadership within the church. What do you think is missing there? What can be done different? And don't be scared. That's why we're doing this. We're being honest here. So tell us the blunt truth of what you see.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Pete. There really is. There's something amiss on the overall scale, right? Most churches that you walk into right now, if you look at if you want to call it the men's ministry, they're not real strong. They're not real large, right? Men are being distracted with so many other things. And so the longer I walk, both in the military and with Christ, the more I realize that leadership is the key. Yeah. And everybody hears it all the time, but I'm telling you, the older you get and the more you see it, it all continues to pivot back to leadership. And I mean at every level, the leadership, and that's what you're referring to is how is the top brass not getting the lower leadership levels engaged enough, to make those men feel comfortable to come in, So it's a double dynamic, really. It's that lower leadership motivating and creating an environment for those men to feel comfortable enough to spend their time, right? Because time is valuable. It's the most valuable thing we have is our time, right? That we personally possess is the time that we have around us and what we're going to do with it. And so So on a leadership aspect, how do you get men involved, And so, we're obviously we're not going to solve it right here. Instructing churches on how to connect. Right. But what we can go after is the men on here that are searching and how to get them to connect.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, brother. So, I've heard the term, and it makes sense, that he doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. And there's a lot of truth in that. But it's not totally true. I think a lot of times you're already equipped and you just don't know it. You don't understand that you're equipped yet. I mean, everybody knows David and Goliath, right? Like, it's probably one of the most known, besides maybe Noah's Ark or whatever, but like David and Goliath is known throughout the world, right? The story. And talking about David, Pete, and you're gonna love this, being a tactician, right? For 40 days, you've got both armies facing each other. The Israelites are standing over there trembling, right? Trying to figure out who's going to fight Goliath. Goliath is challenging him, disgracing God, and nobody stepping up and acting, all the way to where Saul, the king, who, I mean, if you read about him, he was a beast of a man. You know what I mean? Saul himself was just trembling, didn't know what to do, crying in his boots, right? And then here comes David. David comes up, sees it, gets fired up, says, I'll go out and do it, right? But the one aspect that I love is when he's talking to Saul and he's expressing his resolve to kill Goliath, rooted in his faith in God. But he also says, I've been out fighting the lions and the bears, man. I've been taking out the lions and the bears before he gets there. You see, so the entire army is thinking they're going to have to fight Goliath, sword and spear and shield, right? They're thinking that they're going to have to fight this guy on his level, on his same thing. But what they didn't understand, and this is where I say, sometimes you're equipped for a battle that you don't know about. Nobody else was equipped like David was equipped. David looked at it and goes, guys, this is extremely simple. You know what I mean? I'm a sniper. I'll go ahead and just take one shot to the forehead. This dude's done. I'm going to cut his head off and bring it back to you.
Nice.
You know what I mean? So I'm saying that to all the men out there that sometimes you don't feel equipped, but you don't know what God knows and what he's already trained you to do. Yeah. I remember the first time that I had to do a Christian talk up on a stage, right? And I'm watching, right? I'm trying to learn how do you do this? How do you be a preacher, right? Well, Lord didn't make me a preacher, right? But what he did do is he made me a military leader and a military officer. And what can every military officer do? Well, he can brief a battle plan, right? He's a PowerPoint ranger nowadays, right? And so I was literally sitting at Northcom in my office at night going, man, how do I do this? And the Lord just spoke to me and says, do what you do. Do what you do. And I'm like, do what I do. I'm a military man, And he goes, exactly. Do what you do. And so I literally did my first real, on stage, hour-long talk on the Christian platform. That's what I did. I literally built a PowerPoint, you know what I mean? And it was actually speaking about David and faith and fear and walk through it as a military plan. So now on the other aspect, when he will equip you, as you're called, and then he'll equip you. I mean, if you look at Moses, Moses sees the burning bush and falls down and starts hearing from God, and God's telling him, hey man, go, follow me and set my people free. Right. And he puts up his hands. I can't do that. 3 times. He's like, dude, I can't do that. There's no way I can do that. I stutter. The dude had no self-confidence. He already ran from there 40 years ago. And so this is where it's so vital that you have people in your life and dudes in your life, right? Because, when you hear about the Exodus, it's always about Moses bringing them out. But who was actually right at the beginning, those first few plagues, and I can't remember if it's the 3rd or the 4th or somewhere in there, those first 3 or 4 was actually Aaron. Aaron was standing next to Moses, right? Aaron was right there next to him, holding him up, saying, Aaron understood that it's Moses's calling, right? But the Lord was allowing Aaron to give Moses that strength, feeding it into it until he could stand up and do his actual calling. So there's times that, man, if you think you got this huge thing, Iron Edge, right? Like you've got this thing, you got to understand, man, there's most likely the chance that you're not supposed to be doing that alone.
Right.
You've got to have men around you on both sides of you. And case in point, right? If you're a team tactic again, right? If you're out there on the battlefield and you're spread with your squad and you got a guy to your right and a guy to your left, do you guys all change at the same time? Do you guys all change your clips out at the same time? No, that's pretty ignorant, right? What do you do, man?
Yeah,
right? You say, hey, reload. You say reload and you take a knee. And what do those men do? They cover your field of fire. Dude on your right, your dude on the left covers your field of fire so you don't get attacked, right? And the same thing, it's the exact same thing in life, man. If you don't have a dude to your right and a dude to your left to cover you when you need to take a knee, when you need support, man, you're going to get taken out. The enemy is going to attack you when you take that knee. And there's times, I don't care how strong you think you are, you're not going to run through this life by yourself, man. You are going to have to take a knee at times.
Yep.
And so, I guess to get back to your whole point of the question, the men themselves need to start reaching outside of what they've been doing. If you're feeling like you're not connecting, right? There's a reason, because you're doing the same thing. It's called insanity. Don't do the same thing over and over, right? And expect a different result. Like start to reach out. Like you've created this Iron Edge, which is awesome. And inside those, you have those chapters, man. Get in one of those chapters and start reaching out to dude and be like, you know what? Let's go get some coffee, brother. Hey, you know what? Let's go do a hike. Let's go kayak. Let's go do something. You need to start getting in with other men and start doing the iron sharpens iron, man. If you think that you're going to be a battle-tested warrior sitting at the house and only sharpening your own sword with a stone, dude, you're going to get taken out, and you're going to get taken out.
Yep, I totally agree with that. Yeah, and there's also some other points that you're talking about. And I've been doing this. I've been seeking God about this myself. I've gone out and tried to do a few different things. I know the doors were closed on purpose on those things with those different churches and nonprofits, whatever, for a reason, to kind of push me into what I'm doing now. But at the same time, we want to bring in leadership into this, specifically church faith-based leaders, so that they can be sharpened as well. I think a lot of times everybody's looking toward that persona or that person for all the answers all the time. Tell me what I'm supposed to do, guide me in this direction, instead of looking
they'll fail you, man.
Yeah. And I feel bad for the leaders sometimes too. You're putting them in a position where it's like, dude, you can't, this guy is not God. He's not Jesus. You can't put him in that position and expect him to do everything. And guess what? He probably needs some support. He needs you to help him a little bit too, or he or she, whatever. But I get what you're saying on that too. And I think that we shouldn't be stopped by anything. That's what I want everybody else to get out of this. If you feel like there's doors being closed on you, you need to start looking around for the open one, because there are doors that are open, that God's open for you. It's just you got to look around and you have your head on that swivel and be ready, when the door does open to walk through it, and not be afraid to walk through it, or let those other doors that close on you keep you from doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, because God says if you knock on the right door, it'll be opened, right? Yeah. But if you're knocking and it's not being opened, that doesn't mean you kick it in, right? You go to the one, you knock on a different door. Yep. So it's important.
What do you think about the?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you answered so many questions that we actually had, and so I wanted to kind of maybe bring it back to kind of like what I hear you saying to men is that, one, you are equipped already and you might not even know it. And so there's no excuse, like bring what you have to the table and let God use it. And then if you're afraid of the things that you don't know, that's where God says, I'm going to equip you for what you don't know. Right. So those are two of the things that I heard you really say. And then also the question that kind of started like within the church, one of the things I heard you say is this isn't an excuse to check out of the church. As a matter of fact, you need to engage. And what you need to do is not wait for somebody to tell you in the church what you should do. Or, I hear a lot of guys say, well, nobody asked me. I could do this, this, and this. Yeah. Nobody asked me, right? If you're waiting for that out on the battlefield, well, nobody's going to ask you. You better do, right? Even I know that, and I'm not military, right? So I hear you like almost imploring men, like, get engaged, and then don't do it alone. I get guys on your side, find like-minded guys. You guess what? An hour and a half, or if you're Pentecostal, 2.5 hours on Sunday is not going to be enough for you for the week. You're going to have to call up your buddies. You're going to have to make it a mission when you go to church to find that guy that's kind of like-minded, or that God's saying you need to connect with this guy, and go to the coffee shop, go to lunch, whatever it takes, go do a CrossFit workout together, whatever it is, and bond. And then you end up sitting by your buddy, doing a podcast, encouraging other men, or whatever it may lead you to. So is that like, am I hearing you right? Those kind of points?
Yeah, absolutely. You summed it up nicely. The only thing that I would add, trying to listen to Pete's heart and who he's trying to get after and go after, there's also the one aspect of, not only are men disenfranchised with some things, right? They're also a little bit like beaten down, right? They're a little bit just kind of the world, everything, blah, right?
Yeah.
And I was reading, so one point to kind of get you out of that rut, that beating, so to speak, or that mindset, really. I kind of had a little bit of a revelation at one point when I was reading, in Ephesians 6, right, when it's talking about the armor of God, like everybody, put on the whole armor of God, right? But when you look at the whole armor of God, piece by piece, you're talking about a belt, you're talking about a breastplate, you're talking about the sandals fit to run, right? The helmet, shield, and the helmet, right? And then the sword. So 5 of those first 5 that are spoken about, and Pete, you'd understand this, those first 5 are all a defensive measure, right? Everything is defensive. The helmet, everything is there to protect you, right? But what's the one offensive weapon that you have?
Your sword.
The sword of the Spirit, right? The sword of the Spirit is the only offensive weapon that you have. So if you feel like you're being beaten down, if you feel like you're just standing there taking the hits over and over, right? Like you're the tackling dummy, it's probably because you're not employing your offensive tactics. Mm-hmm. So he's already your defender. He states it multiple times. He is your defender, and you already know where the end is. So if defense wins the game, you already know that's how it works. If defensive wins the game, why aren't you running up the score, man?
Yeah.
Why aren't you taking home the cheerleader by throwing the long bombs, man? Like, why aren't you doing the Peter and the Paul action and going deep with it, right? You're complaining because you're stuck in a rut and you're taking the hits, but it's just because you put on the armor of God, but you forgot to go on offense, man. You forgot to pull out the sword of the Spirit, and the sword of the Spirit is the word. So if you're feeling beat down and you're feeling run down and you don't take the time to start getting in the word and reading it and understanding it, and I tell you, man, you'll read, and you guys know this, you can attest to it. You read a passage when you're a junior Christian and it makes perfect sense and it feeds into you so well. And then 10 years later, you read it again, and you're like, holy cow, right? Like, every soldier knows, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? Everybody knows that. And I'm sure you used that when you were in Iraq, as I used it in Afghanistan, right? And when I read it, it gave me strength, and it gave me peace, and it gave me comfort, and it gave me resolve, because I knew that he was with me as I walked through that valley of the shadow of death. But when I visioned that walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I envisioned it as a very dark, deep, scary place, right? But later in life, as I've kind of walked through this thing, and I go back and revisit it, think, have you taken the words and pieces and just kind of looked at it? First, you're walking. That's pretty peaceful, man. Right? Like, I don't remember many times in battle that I was just
walking through the woods.
You know what I mean? So there's this peace that comes with just the term walk. You're not anxious. You're not running. You're not sprinting. You're just peacefully walking through a valley. Right? Take just valley. if you're going to walk, right? Well, yeah, there is a kill box aspect to it. Yeah. Yeah. If you can take it on that, but like, there's a reason why people congregate in the valleys and not on the mountainsides and on the mountaintop, right? Because it's easy.
Yeah.
Stuff grows there. It's fertile there. The water's there. The life is there. So when you're saying you're peacefully walking through a valley, man, you're not having to climb this massive hill and over boulders and all that other stuff. So walk through the valley of the shadow. Oh, okay. Shadow. You're like, oh, it's dark. No, man. No, it's just the shadow. So anybody that's no longer a child is not afraid of the shadow, because you understand it's just a shadow. There's nothing there. You walk through, there's nothing in a shadow. And then the valley of death. And if you want to, in the shadow of death, the death, I mean, come on, man, you already know that it was conquered. You already know what happens when you die, right? So it takes on a whole different aspect as you reread these passages. So just because you've read some passage, you've read the Gospels, I understand the Gospels, you better dive back into there and start reading those parables again, because it will speak to you in a different way. So, Dad, to your point, man, you summed it up great for me. The only other thing I would say is once you start getting in those communities and doing those things, man, you need to do your part for your brother, and you need to get into that word and start sharpening that sword of your own. So when you start to clash, you can really clash, you can really train, and you can really clash with each other, or it's just a social club.
Yeah. I'm sick of those, honestly. I like a little banter back and forth. I want people to point out, that's the one thing I found out about being in isolation, right? And I know a lot of men can attest to this throughout COVID and all this other crap. There's nobody there to shine a light, hold up the mirror, or say, hey, you need to work on this, or that's not really accurate, and this is why. When you live in that isolation, that bubble, it's real easy just to become complacent, think that you're doing everything perfect, or lie to yourself and tell yourself you're doing fine because everything's kind of easy peasy, it's just going along. But you can't you can't do that. I mean, it doesn't work. You need your brother to not be scared to do that. We live in a culture now where you don't point out people's faults, right? That's just straight up rude. You'll get I think you'll get canceled, I think is what they call it. Exactly. That is going to destroy a lot of lives, that right there, because people are going to think there's something they're not. And then someday that situation is going to come up where reality is going to hit you, because reality is real no matter what you do. There's death, there's lies and truth, and they're universal. And so that reality is going to get thrown up, and you're going to think, I'm not that person at all. It's going to destroy your life. So I think we as brothers need to do that. We'll be able to talk to each other like we're doing right now, and not have a problem pointing out some of our faults and saying, hey, you need to work on this, or you need to work on this. But I do think you're right. In those local chapters, that's where that needs to happen. The way we're setting it up is not going to be, hey, we're going to have this for you to talk about once a week in your local chapter, your small group. The way it's set up is like, hey, I want to go golf, man. Who wants to go with me? I want to go top golf, or I want to go, shoot some hoops. Who wants to go with me? And I want to go just have some coffee and or maybe go grab lunch, at the pub. That's where that happens. It doesn't happen when you're having to discuss. I mean, scripture should be involved, but when you're having that structured, hey, we need to talk about this topic. Usually, one person's talking, everybody else is listening. That's called preaching, and we get that every week on Sunday, maybe Wednesday.
For a dude with ADD, that becomes problematic if I have to listen. You know what I mean? For the 50 minutes, man.
I think what you're saying is going to resonate with this group here. I don't need to go back into it, but if you could pull out and kind of sum up everything we've been talking about, and give our people, give Iron Edge, right, our team members, something that they can use right now in their lives to find and fulfill their mission, which is really what we're trying to do. What do you think that would be? I know that's a loaded one, but I think you can handle it.
Yeah, that's if you want me to summarize that's a lot. To summarize.
Maybe we should do a sermon on that one. I don't know.
Another way to say another way to say this, I think, is what's one thing that you want us to remember that we can walk away with, that we can begin to apply or begin to walk into, kind of turn the tide.
See, you got to have a civilian around, man.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm already in the back of my mind writing PowerPoints for you, dude.
We love to make speeches, don't we?
We do. No, Chad, to answer the question. So Pete's heart in this whole thing, right, is to get after the deficiency, the gap that exists in getting men moving again, right? We see it in the churches. I mean, I go to a pretty large church, and when you go to one of the Bible studies, there's 20 men there. That's problematic, and I wish we could do something in here that would help the church itself, right? Like within the leadership and access, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is actually going after the men that are disillusioned at the time, right? So I'd say if you're listening to this podcast and you came into Iron Edge because you're probably one of these disillusioned, you're probably out there trying to figure out, like, man, I feel like there's something more I should be a part of, right? And if you're asking that question, then the question is yes, it is, right? And so I would absolutely say that you have to have the two main aspects that will get you in line with finding your calling. And the calling is a whole nother thing, because I think the calling morphs as you go older and through series, and understanding that your initial calling is just to be a disciple of Christ, right? That is if you're going to say what's your calling? Well, first, I'm a disciple. That's your calling. So no matter where you're at right now, you understand that your calling is a disciple. That's what it is. And so you can do that whether you're a businessman, a military man, even a pastor, right? Like that's your calling first. But then to transition for that and to see where God wants to take you and where the creator wants you to create within his creation, right? Like he built you to create things, to figure out what that piece of your calling is, then it's the two main aspects, man. You have to fellowship. You have to start sharpening, your sword off other men, because you're just not going to grow. And any military man, I do jujitsu with my boys, right? And mainly because they love it, but I just really enjoy rolling with my boys, right? But there is no way you could become good at a martial arts, at a jujitsu, if the only thing you're going against is the practice dummy in my garage. It's not going to work. There's no resistance. There's nothing with it, right? So to sum it up, man, you've got to get into a group with men and start sharpening each other. But then you have to do your part. You can't hear from the Holy Spirit. You can't get with God unless you're listening to the word. You don't live on bread alone, right? And I turned 44 this year. So Matthew 4:4 is actually like my verse for this whole year, that man does not live on bread alone. And Jesus said that when he was sitting out in the wilderness, right, being tempted. And he was like, look, man, you don't live on bread alone, but every word from God. So men have got to get back into the word. Even if you think you've read it or you've never read it, you've got to get back in there, and you've got to start letting that like influx into your heart. Yeah. When I originally, one of the main pivot points in my life in 2013, I was on a furlough because I was a federal technician at the time for a short period. And so I had this time off. And so I went on a hike and anyway, I went through the whole book of Ezekiel, and within that, he told me to read it, but before I actually went out to do something, he told me to eat the word 3 times, so there's a given thing over and over that he says, read the word, then move out. You can't get your strength. You can't get your wisdom. You can't get any of that unless you get it in you first. Right. So Chad, to answer your question, that'd be the two things, man. You need fellowship that you can sharpen it, and you got to get in the word to actually be able to hear what your calling is. You don't even know what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes, sir. That's it right there.
Love it.
Yep. Well, hey, thanks, Judd. I appreciate the time. We went a little over. That's okay, though. Yeah. I'm not going to cut much out other than what the devil cut out for us. Stinking devil. Dang internet.
Hey, William McDowell, he's a big worship pastor. He was at our church, and there was sound problems, and he goes, look, it's not the devil, it's just sound. So I'd say, look, it's not the devil, it's just technology.
Because the internet is the devil. So, I mean,
yeah. That's a good point. So this is that. I mean, I know it's happened in your guys' life so many times, man. You know, you're like, oh, yep, that's it. One time, me and my wife were going down to this in Page, this little church event, this little church gathering, right? And this lady was coming in, and it turned out to be extremely powerful. She spoke words over us, and it was very powerful. But it was hilarious because on the way down there, out of the blue, me and my wife get into a massive, I'm talking massive fight. You know what I mean? To the screaming and the yelling, to the point that I have to drive past the church, right? Because we're still into this thing, and she's like, and she's literally at the point, let me out of the car, right? And I'm like, you're not getting out of the car. And she reaches over, and we're going maybe 15 miles an hour because we're coming near a stop sign, and she reaches over and grabs the shift and throws it in park. So I mean, you just hear the transmission, you know what I mean? Opens the door, barefoot. Right? Because she had her heels on, but her heels weren't on yet because she was going to put them on as she gets out of the car, but barefoot, and just starts walking down the road, dude. I'm like, get in the car, I'll walk. And so I get out and I start walking. So I did settle who's more stubborn because she didn't turn. She kept going. You know what I mean? Anyway, so it was funny because now, you know, soon after, you know, we reconcile, and we reconciled quickly. We got actually to church. And it was amazing. She spoke over both of us, and it was very powerful, you know, feeding into us. But it was just hilarious. Like once we went back to the house and looking at it, you're like, dude, that was totally, you know, devil just playing, you know what I mean? Just little nugget, and watch this explosion because I can't have you at the church that day. You know, it was awesome, man. It was so funny, dude.
Yep.
Okay. It was the devil then.
That was the devil.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate your time. But we will be hopefully having you on again to talk about some other things. Sure. I kind of want to get into, I do want to get into leadership principles for church leaders and start talking about how they can integrate some of the stuff that we know in the military into, because we were talking about that. It's full circle. All the stuff we learned in the military, the principles are biblical principles. It's funny, you know, because I mean, we're actually already pouring that into people. They just don't realize it. But it'd be cool to talk about that a little bit more in the future. So hopefully soon. And thank you for taking the time. You know,
this is awesome, man. This is a good way to spend a Saturday morning, dude.
Yeah, for sure. We'll do it again soon.
Wow, what an incredible time with Judd. Just getting to know him a little bit through these podcasts, you can see he just brings a lot to the table. But one of the things that I really appreciated is his heart to see you guys, you know, grow, and to see you find God at deeper levels. That's our heart here at Iron Edge. We want to resource you. We want to bring people like Judd, you know, to your ears or to your eyes, and then connect you with, you know, like-minded guys that are really trying to get after it. We know you're here because you want more, and we're certainly grateful that you would spend any time with us. But we're just trying to be that guy on the right and the left, like Judd talked about. We're just trying to resource you, help you in any way we can. You know, Iron Edge is just taking off. This is a God thing. We're not pushing an agenda. We're just trying to really follow the spirit here. And so we know many of you guys are on the Facebook platform, but we want to specifically tell you to go to ironedgesharp.com. You have to sign up. So just because you're on the Facebook platform doesn't mean you're on the website. And that's where we really want to steer things. That's going to help us to connect and resource and grow and grow out a little bit more. So please do that. And hey, spread the word. You got other guys that you know, that you talk to, you've shared, like, and they're feeling frustrated or whatever it is. Tell them, go to this website, sign up, listen to these podcasts, watch it on YouTube, whatever it is. Just be a part. And then, guys, go back to your churches and be those men. You're going to be you know, fired up. You're going to be a little bit stronger, and maybe things will feel the same. But when you bring that, and you bring expectation, and you bring confidence, that you're not just trying to consume, you know, that you're bringing something to the table, you know, maybe you'll be able to tap on somebody that day and pray with them and say, hey, I know exactly how you feel. I felt that way just like a month ago. This is what I'm doing, or whatever it may be. But that's really what we're seeing. And like I said, we're really just aligning with what God's doing right now, you know, and trying to follow him. So, yeah.
We've been hearing a lot. I mean, there's so many people out there. I was reading an article about Denzel Washington giving a speech at a men's meeting just specifically talking about the exact points that we're talking about right here. I think there's a move of the spirit across our nation right now, even international. We do have people internationally who are interested in this, and so just make sure you're on our site. When you go into the site, you actually become a member. And so the couple cool things about membership, as these chapters grow, and we're going to be identifying managers and leaders for those chapters, they'll have a captain's badge, the little captain's badge that'll show that they're the chapter leader for the Phoenix group or for the OKC group or for Yosemite. They'll be able to connect with you directly, create some opportunities for you guys to get together, do things together. We're not going to manage that too much because every location is different, right? If you're in Phoenix and you want to go to Topgolf because you have sunshine all year round, then that's what you do. Or you just want to go and sit in the air conditioning because it's summertime. You can go do that. If you're out here in Charleston, you want to go out on the boat and go fishing or something, we can go do that. But as you get involved and as you start contributing, those captains are going to keep track of that within your group. And we have these challenge coins that we're going to be handing out. You have to rise to the challenge to get the coin. And I know it might not seem like a big deal to some people. I know a lot of military guys are like, oh, cool challenge coin. We get all excited about them, right? But this really is just it's a symbol of your dedication to keeping your brother on the straight and narrow and focusing on that team effort to move forward, as the church and lead and serve. So we're excited about it. There's a lot going on right now. We are kind of just throwing the cart before the horse on everything and just trusting God to kind of lead us. And he has. And so we're not too concerned. There's going to be some financial aspect of this somewhere along the line. I'm not too concerned about it because we are not a 501c3 yet. We are going to be soon. Once we're a 501c3, then we can talk about that if we need to. But really, what I want to focus on is just making sure that you're getting what you need to find that purpose and direction in your life that God wants you to do. I don't know who's in our group right now. I know who you are, but I don't know you and what your calling is or what you're feeling led to do. Make sure you let us know. If you have an idea to do something, if you have an idea for a nonprofit or you have an idea for a service or you want to be a missionary, whatever it is, we'll find organizations for you to work with. There's a ton of them out there, and I've worked with a lot of them. So anyway, I just want you guys to know we're praying for all of you, and we're excited to see where this goes. And I think that this is the beginning of a movement that is gonna rock the church. I hope. That's my prayer. We've been divided for way too long and sitting on the sidelines for way too long because we can't. But I think there's a sense of urgency here because of whatever's coming down the pipe, that we need to be unified and serving and leading in our families and our businesses in the church. And God's gonna give us direction on how to do that. So anyway, thank you all. Next time we see you, Shad will be back in Oklahoma, but we'll be continuing to work together and provide these podcasts. And if you are interested in it, let us know. We'll bring on the podcast. We have no problem talking. We're not looking for fame and fortune here. We're looking for authentic people that want to serve. So if you're interested, let us know. Same thing with writing articles. We were looking for people to write articles on the blog. If you want to serve, there's ways you can serve right now within Iron Edge as well. But we're looking forward to it, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. God bless. Peace.